In the age of the modern surveillance apparatus, the U.S. established permanent digital codes such that surveillance apparatus adapts to resistance. We're going off here could once allow privacy of the state, now comes to you. Ingram Roland 16. We've really realized that token science fiction, ubiquitous surveillance, universal system effectively in place where public and private activities record, upload, share the stories, surveillance, what a cultural practice, and the way we live become produce exchange. The surveillance ourselves, that is the defining experience of surveillance to form and perceive abilities to make oneself unseen, but going unseen, that's to resist being perceived as a fixed, discrete subject to political surveillance mechanism, society's control, in which always demands sustained performances, imperceptibilities, effectively charging, sustainable form microactivism in the face of universal surveillance mechanisms. Surveillance unique to digital age include more dispersed agencies than top-down monitoring individuals and contain state agencies, collects or categorize data about individuals, being watched across a wide range of public and private contents. In other words, domain on target scrutiny in individuals, groups instead turn mass monitoring, except big data technology, shout the non-reducibility of the embodied human, individual divisive parts, reducible data representation that have been sorted into various categories, automated surveillance of web searches, online purchase, social media, music, movies, and so on, become immaterial labor is constantly drawn into digital social activities and formally carried out by the monitoring capability of the internet unfolding individual space as sort of funneling towards the digital that happens to public acceptance of the penetration of digital surveillance to the realm of free time enclosure is not a matter of crossing physical boundaries, but equipping oneself with appropriate technology. When a fleet of GSP cars patrolling the street near you, you need not be equipped with tech. You're even phone to become digitally closed. You have few withdraw from digital altogether. Digital comes to you. The dispersonalized surveillance and control side is not just practically human subject being reduced to data representations. Instead, the digital enclosure becomes universal, flexible boundary of virtual and physical. Inventors panopticon immanents can see each other, can always be counted, being seen mechanisms of control sides, no performance, individual identity within the ethic and non-reducible human territory can preclude the possibility of digital devaluation. And we no longer interact with the internet but are immersed in it. Technology is no longer a tool resistant to the very side of alternative politics or movements like Tahrir Square were empowered with spectral strategies of resistance to worsen traditional logical power dynamics. Society of control can flourish into radical democracy. Oliver 14. The society of control left assumed different forms compared to the resistant link manifestation. Foucault's side did someone was transferred to Tahrir Square constitutes a violent form of resistance kind of lose society's control. Events one can see never happen from within. Rising back networks which usually comprise the means control suggest that is a much more than resistance represents the germ of alternative politics without advanced means of communication will lead to this formation dissolution who could not happen as quickly as they did by assuming that productive desires the most promising aspect of society, preserving society control is inaugurated by the very means of exercising control in the first place, namely the networks which form the base of lock individuals and system of control. For marketing strategies, do NSA surveillance strategies which exercise control in the guise of self-control far more efficiently, but not from a person. And once communities have to enter the internet, changing politics, technology could emerge. Theory insatiated when manifestation devices not simply the means of resistance protest. Technology no near means of the sensitive tool, compromising the gateway of the communication space flows. You constantly use dense space flows of reverse logical polarity of power. Society's control designing machines comprising spectral subject forming and solving legal scripts to Tahrir Square inaugurate a particularly radical variety of politics that insatiate a model political action which surpasses the resistance direction of what called model radical democracy. And the affective drive of metadata mastery establishes a second identity constructed in metadata that reduces subjectivity to biometric calculations of a threat in order to be digitally policed and exterminated. Crafted 16. Algorithmic governments occurs in geographic context, new such activities of the purpose of identifying contained threats through various mechanisms to control threats or proliferating local activities, increasingly essential because of the vast amounts of big data, data profiles, active form, space of possibility, whether you're aware of them, algorithms may impact your chances of employment, credit, education, health, travel, base control of information, assemblages of big data sensors, algorithms less interest in who a suspect might be than in what a future suspect may become. The algorithms are directed at producing certain kinds of subjects to reduce or redirect risk. The biometric devices not only verify identity, also shape how, where, and for what purposes authorized bodies can move within society's control of matter, modulating, controlling, adapting, and affecting disciplinary societies have enumeration that indicates its position within a mass. The primary purpose is to fit the individual with mass data abstraction becomes commoditized. In addition to monetization, data doubles and big data have led to policy outcomes, what some call computational politics. Data double should be understood in political economic terms. Consequences that the data doubles can circulate around in ways that not necessarily be following predetermined paths. A question that which rather than centers of relays. These relays should not be thought of as simply automated passing forward event variation. What's important no longer neither a signature or number. One's individual electronic card that gives a raise the barrier, but the card can easily just be rejected on a given day or between certain hours. We're counting not the barrier, but the computer that tracks each person's position, listed or illicit, that affects a universal modulation, capacities that digitally surveil through biometrics, automatic facial recognition, location tracking, help locate, identify, assess potential subject, which coupled with that technology creates an actionable threat score. Similar advent of predictive policing, one not need to be aware of this monitoring nor have been extent. While geofencing and based advertising susceptible to being circumvented, you can turn off your face. And surveillance is the cozy warm jacket that puts you at ease in those cold winter nights when the government has shut off the power. Regulatory events to reform state surveillance assemblages reinscribe disaster which use the fundamental contradiction of capitalism, but both oppression and dissent for work and neoliberal governmentality. Mackay and Wood 13. Neoliberal government regulatory experimentation support argument for most public adoptive forms of surveillance being predominant regulatory experimentation, not simply restatement disaster capitalism, although those undoubtedly seems to be the case more subtle neoliberal policies are incomplete in the failure of a particular policy, not seen as reason for abandonment, but rather as conditions of new regulatory innovation. Surveillance does not prevent crime, yet it continues to spread as policy solutions become a standard of urban development and gentrification. Policy technology spread through informal connections within neoliberalism and changes in nature, expertise, circulation, particular time spaces, exemplary best practice. Surveillance not just a vain mimetic fashion, but actively produced by interested protagonists through books, conferences, consulting practices. The current spread of drone surveillance aspects of Israeli occupation in Palestine has been translated to such context as U.S. airport. Lesson learning is treated depoliticized way, typical of technocratic problem-solving approach to government that pressure on Palestine to monitor Chinese and surveillance London residents and gentrification of Manhattan can all become useful resources for government and neoliberal functions to modulate surveillance assemblage towards exclusionary politics. Focus on politics as surveillance is key. Vandalized 18. How to say surveillance, intelligence, and security when technology practices is increasingly difficult to distinguish from video tunes. The very same technology serves simultaneously as a source of exploitation and resistance challenges an existing dichotomy of individual state surveillance on one hand, the various forms of inverse account surveillance or suit surveillance on the other. Approach employs a vocabularies, assemblages, and active network theory in order to operationalize critical cartography for present purposes, provide insights to distinct actors types in association with each other, topology, scope, scale, and reach a sophisticated system of advanced network technologies employed for surveillance. Being enrolled in surveillance assemblage, they have become surveillance technology. Surveillance technology not merely in situ, but inactive as enacted by the very functioning part of surveillance assemblages, are particularly in cooperating actors input signals and data sets. Exacerbate the issue related to the coercive nature of the state corporate nexus, the surveillance industrial complex, more than this and force compliance. This contribution provides thus analytical targets, concepts, empirical cartographic methods for examining surveillance technologies and the composition. The maps could serve as a mess of base maps of research products. It's important to continue developing critical cartographies and to facilitate the proliferation. Countermaps may only be represented as networks, but countermaps are productive in raising awareness and gaining support for meaningful resistance against mass surveillance. And global surveillance assemblages post 9/11 operate to deploy technologies control. Critical cartography is the first step to enable empirical inquiry. Vandalized 18. Revelations about post 9/11 surveillance have repeatedly confirmed suspected clandestine surveillance approaches to allow for critical cartographic analysis to conceptualize surveillance through assemblage and make sense of the artificial and hybrid quality of society, control society operating as a network of heterogeneous elements that spread arithmetically. Cartographic analysis acknowledges heterogeneity being crucial importance to take into consideration how heterogeneous technology, artifacts, software programs, and systems will deploy to cooperate towards common sense of surveillance interests. Insights and verify further empirical analysis, material specificity, modularity, guidance, how to resist the problems associated with embedded systems that fail. Crucially, allows one to operationalize critical cartographic strategies, map the material, and set a model relationship of actors in distinct networks in which they take part. Value utilizing both vocabularies lies in the developing approach that is first and foremost grounded in empirical cartography, while being attentive to the rich conceptual nuances of assemblages that have been used to study contemporary global surveillance. And countermapping is a form of counter surveillance that allows for the exchange of diffuse crowdsourced information and enables disparate yet precise resistance. Wood Thompson 18. Visibility lies in the heart of counter surveillance. Crowd mapping, the aggregation of crowd generated inputs with the geographically provide real-time interactive information events creates new pathways through space. Physical space become aggregated. Mobile space is created by connection using mobile interfaces which are connected to the internet. A person can move through urban and online spaces simultaneously, uploading and downloading information as they go about daily business. Hybridized nature of urban space and movement generate contexts that enable individuals to contest, circumvent, surveilled arrangements. They are produced by individuals plugging in online counter surveillance assemblages constituted by space that flows simultaneously, entered online but inhabited offline. Plot count hegemonic cartography over spaces so otherwise highly ordered through counter surveillance assemblages. Individuals may circumvent surveillance control measures and transform public space and movement in sites transition, altering the location of intended crime to avoid detection or apprehension. Individual tactics of surveillance neutralization supplemented by technology media counter surveillance assemblages. Crowdsourced counter surveillance represents one of the many essential characterized by crime sourcing and discovery neutralization techniques. Aggregation, locational data collected, technological infrastructure that facilitates knowledge discovery. New media have generated unprecedented opportunities for counter surveillance and biometric categorization, securitizing the environment, threats to capital nation, ensuring the destruction of wide swaths of the environment, once known as Bikini Atoll and Yucca Mountain, under the clandestine cloak of national security. Now 15. Purely Marxist critiques commodities negligent in the connection between new practices and discourse shaping actions, which involve reterritorizations, deterritorizations, which produce the same new smooth space of the application called calculative practice. The deployed concept of choreography to describe sense that neoliberalizing moves that deployed within the assembly can point to social environmental sacrifice and both direct and circuitous ways. Such places are written off for environmental destruction in the name of high-purpose national interest applied to the Cold War to describe such territories such as Bikini Atoll for every alien the nuclear test and production sacrifice zone corresponds to political economic, which is part of parcel of the age agenda of economic, political, cultural hegemony, often with imperializing tendencies. Overall trend has been the shifting emphasis allocation resources territorial forms of government to neoliberal flow-based governments, cleanses to territory severely, overtly active challenges territoriality, presenting land alternative use options, and ecological knowledge as partners, rise math process with coexist and undermine with protective efforts of the forest estate by arborist and forest management.
So, where did you stop?
Management. It's like kind of near the bottom.
Okay.
It's before the bolded stuff in the bottom part.
Before the bold stuff at the bottom.
Yeah.
Give me a second. Mark it. Okay, yeah, got it. So you didn't get to the P card.
Is that in there?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it is. That's fine.
Weird.
Okay. Good. Process start.
You go first, you. So just, I guess, what exactly does countermapping entail?
Countermapping. So the Wood and Thompson evidence talks about how sort of using our process in which we can sort of like develop these ways to get through both like physical urban spaces while being simultaneously connected to online spaces as a way to subvert violent government surveillance technologies or.
I still don't get what. Like,
yeah.
So our argument is that surveillance is ubiquitous and inevitable, and there is no way to run or hide or escape it in any way. And the only method of possibility for that is to create small moments of change, and that is possible through analyzing the way the state is creating a map of resistance to the state's efforts. So the way the state looks at protesters, activists, and other members of the resistance community.
So how does that like help deal with the problem of surveillance?
Because you stay one step ahead.
Yeah, it's about like an analysis of what the government and these other like hostile state actors are doing and reacting
so
proactively.
When we consider like
reacting.
all the tools that state actors and people working for the state have to conduct surveillance, how do you manage to escape all of that?
Yeah, it's a constant correction to the way the state is trying to resist
What do those corrections look like?
Well, they are obviously unique and infinite and constantly changing. That's the Tarrier evidence from the Oliver card. Like, you want to keep creating new methods. That's the idea. Everything is going to be co-opted eventually. You're creating a new method that works for a certain period of time, and when it starts to be co-opted, you have to find a new method.
Okay, how is there infinite methods to deal with
Like it's because
Occupy Wall Street worked for a while.
The process of the app is like iterative and like learns from previous mistakes and failures. Like we cite Tahrir Square not as something that we see as like a failed movement, but rather something that we can learn from and use that to adapt to other sort of government
action. How is Occupy Wall Street like a counter surveillance movement?
Cop Watch.
Oh, yeah, I'm being dumb. Okay, so, but even if, like, it can work temporarily, like, won't we just reach a point where there's, like, nothing left to do?
No, there's not. That's the sort of the point.
Okay, but then
the state in that apparatus will always react, so we will always react to those reactions. It's a constant process of staying.
Technology evolves, resistance evolves. Like, saying that we'll run out of ideas.
Yeah, there's not like some sort of wall that happens and then that can't be overcome.
Right, but what do these like methods like? Give me an example of a method like a new method that could be created, not just like a movement in the past.
Well, that's like a little bit difficult.
The point of the app.
Yeah, it's sort of the point of the app.
Okay,
that like these sort of new methods that the state will use, we don't know. We can't predict that entirely with certainty in a concrete fashion. But we were saying through the app, we sort of create a process in which we can adapt to those things when they come.
Okay. I am going to run like tiny starting. Okay, yeah, nice. Around 10 seconds. I'm sending your case now.
You say you stop, right?
Yeah, I ran 10 seconds.
How many sheets of paper?
Should be 2.
3 cases of some page.
Well, I mean, 2 new ones and then
2 new ones.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Alright, I'm being dumb. Ignore me.
No worries.
Alright, let me send. Sorry, it got saved in a weird place, so I'm trying to make sure that I'm not sending something random. Okay, yeah, that's right. Okay, send it.
Oh, did you add me to the chain?
I did.
Okay.
Do you?
I do not. Okay, there we go.
Oh, that's not good. It did not. This is the wrong file. It didn't save.
Oh.
I'm going to run prep while I find the right thing. Yeah, I think it didn't save.
Alright, well, stop prep for a minute, come back here, and then we'll like put the stuff back in.
No.
Did you find it?
There's like 2 versions, I think, with the same name and the same. Yeah, okay, I found the right one. Okay. Ending prep 5854. I was gonna say that file looked a little short.
Is there a new doc you're sending?
Yeah, I'm sending a new doc. Okay, it's not.
Peter's kid's got caught clipping.
Yes.
Let me know once you guys have the doc pulled up.
Yeah, looks like.
And sorry about that mix-up.
It's all good.
Both ready?
Mm-hmm.
Alright.
Right, hang on, your partner's not ready. Right, now I'm good.
Starting.
First off, our interpretation is minimalist. All we ask is the affirmative defend resolutional action, Ayrton 903. This topic contains an agent to the action of the United States. The verb phrase urges to action. For example, should adopt means to put in policy into action through governmental means. Specification, directions, or limits. Free trade example would eliminate the increasing tariffs. Proposition of the future action entirely based by whether something ought to occur. And topicality is voting issue for 2 reasons. First is the role of the negative. Only negation makes any critique at all possible in the first place. Allison and H2K. Research becomes a matter of deep familiarization and interpreting social phenomena in novel ways compared to cultural dominant categories. Remember, researchers trapped by cultural ethnicities and parochials and the cultural phenomena they encounter not recognized as such, but as seen as natural. The problem can be like this makes it difficult to look upon practices of the world and one may appoint a systematically grading against working with negation as principles. Researchers know what organizations are about this, because given ideas and are consequently unlikely to discover anything new. These people cannot be expected to adopt naive questioning perspective or avoid quelling down questioning assumptions. Working with negation is in the state of intent between realized ideas and alternatives that make it possible to avoid income by establishing this. By negating, it becomes possible to see in a different meaningful way by consistently seeking out countermeasures to provide meaningful consciousness. It is possible to reach interpretation of empirical phenomena that are elucidated in the state of intention. It's about the way the phenomena are conceptualized in terms of natural, the political, or problematic, or rational, by making familiar forward about problem lines passing self-evident. One way of reducing cultural parochialism to widen the freight of reference. Use of powerful counterpoints might be called negative dialectics. We are studying empirical phenomena only our understanding is fixed from reality, we can prison order that socially constructed reality. Conditions would be taken for granted and no interesting understanding of culture would be produced by negating existing reality. Fruitful insights can be achieved. Negation may be referred to empirically non-existent order to phenomena actually existing. The dialectical approach may be proceed from less abstract and more empirically grounded types of negation. Instead of taking for granted reproduction of gender differences, one may proceed from the ideal of a positive division of labor. Without the idea of negation, the fact that sexual discrimination or exploitation of nature takes place would not have been recognized. Division of labor between sexes would be not worth mentioning. Racism is clearly visible to anybody who walks through a big company office. Black clericals are mainly reserved for routine pressurized low-paid jobs. The great majority of researchers seem to hardly recognize the phenomenon. Little theoretical sophistication can be called for example of why it's so obvious. Nevertheless, the implicit regulatory ideal of non-racial division of labor informs the account. Without observation would be pointless. Being strongly inspired by a particular critical theory may reduce the chance of interesting breakdowns. A worse particular theory may lead to routine and predictable slottings into finding theory. Technocratic consciousness may be the interpretation of searching for empirical material. Theory can be used in self-conscious way like providing for defamiliarizations and other terms of the favorite vocabulary. There's a clear over time favorite theoretical vocabulary might domesticate the empirical material and make it familiar. And second is the role of value. Your value is meaningless without the possibility of negation. Easy decisions or no decision at all, leading to the worst of all possible outcomes. Matthew 17. Existing principles must be subjected to interpretation. In order to justice done if the judge refuses existing orders, there must not be a machine. In order to position absolute power to make a decision, this would be even less guaranteed than a machine operated system. We need some configuration of pure unity and multiplicity as a system that there contends the totalitarian in dysfunction produced by state's pure unity, yet just cannot be served by pure multiplicity. There must be some structure. Balance regards to constant openness while maintaining pragmatic attitude to avoid collapsing into absurdity. A state must be attracted to plurality. Injustice occurs in all society.
suggesting that just as infinite Darwinism, capitalism contribute to combative society, producing winners and losers. How can you make a decision between competing solutions now? This is only provisional. Without deciding undecidability, no choice is made. There is no decision in ethics and politics without some of that undecidability. If we knew what to do before, the decision would not be a decision. Undecidability is the recognition of competing responses. Undecidability is opposed to the formulaic calculation of law without the search for competing responses, the generation of alternative responses. There's merely an unwitting response. Good decisions leap beyond well-being, prepared as far as possible by information. Decisions are important, proactive, secure decisions based only on extra knowledge or wouldn't embedding limits. A genuine decision cannot be noted, but can be afforded as widely as possible. A decision cannot be escaped. The merit can be measured by information. Society entrusts governmental bodies with responsibility to make decisions. There must be some reason that there must always hinge on the normative presence. There's no way to escape this influence, but a decision must be justified as legitimate by demonstrating its informed. This is a condition of political responsibility, read of insolence, and the rhetoric of demagogues. Formulaic application can perpetuate injustice. And consider a plan. In regardless of topical action, having a concrete demand is an independent reason to vote. Neg political platforms generate productive internal and external dialogues to crystallize and focus critical energy. White 16. Each advance purpose is visible in the counter-purpose and recession. Actors surmount this by tactical innovation. Movements are growing, complexity and pivoting away from versus social transitioning and cohesive force capable of winning. Took 11 years for Caesar to become the largest party in Greece. 5 years for Vice to become the second largest in Italy, and 3 years for Podemos to rank third. But from the beginning, the goals of Five Star were clearly defined. Each star represents the concrete demand, following the only one sustainable transportation, sustainable development, free and open internet, environmentalism. Occupy quickly evolved into so many general critiques that ultimately appeared without concrete demands. Occupy was never able to clearly define the movements. Space decision making was not capable of complex policy decision, while Occupy anticipated in less than a year. 5 stars kept going. Gina Berto asked how many trusted activists Occupy could count on. Few were left. Moreover, before anyone could claim to be an Occupy, many our forces did so in order to describe the movement. There's no way for anyone to know. Gina Berto told the precise number of current 5-star members. Uncritical openness was Occupy's capital. The general assemblies were powerless by the inability to distinguish between true or false. But this new movement with Occupy for a day were given equal state acts to found with the first encampments. The movement was ultimately police demonstrations in the 1990s sprang an initiative that made Occupy indispensable to dissipating the movement's revolutionary movement in the re-election campaign. And next up, focusing on the reduction of state power, misdiagnosis of the problem. Private entities collect infinite amounts of data. Only class perspective and the alternative can resolve private surveillance to reclaim these tools and name the working class. Group 17. Liberal privacy concepts typically focus on privacy invasions by the state, but ignore invasions by companies. Stem from requests for profit by private companies. The task of social privacy conception is go beyond the focus of privacy concepts, protection of state interference into private spheres, but identify those cases where political regulation and need for protection of the rights of consumers or works. Liberal privacy concepts imply that one cannot own himself in personal things, but also mean the production. The consequences of very close society quad because the idea of keeping is to seek rights, private, etc. No need for keeping power sources secret, and therefore no need for a liberal concept of privacy. Not mean that in a society shaped by participatory democracy, all forms of privacy vanish. It is necessary to question liberal capitalist privacy ideology, to struggle for social privacy, not to idealize privacy, but to think about its contradictions and its relation to private property. And capitalism generates internal contradictions, erupting imperialism, nuclear war, and ecocide foster 5. Capitalism is a globally expensive contradiction between transnational economic aspirations and the fact that it remains rooted in particular nation states insurmountable. The attempt to overcome this are part of this fundamental logic, but instead state not the control of the care of the planet, but its totality of one hegemonic superpower, which means the authoritarian and violent at its disposal. The unprecedented dangers of this new global order are revealed in nuclear proliferation and increased chances of an outbreak of nuclear war and planetary ecological destruction. And vote negative to endorse orthodox Marxism. Revolutionary theory is a prior question. We should affirm the historical necessity of communism. Communal 12. Capitalism has simplified the class of techniques by concentrating wealth and power in the hands of a few. The ruling class is unfit to rule. Capitalism has brought in the beginning working class whose common condition gives them not the need, but the power to establish a society in which from each according to their ability, each according to the need. Without revolutionary theory, there can be no revolutionary movement. We are confronted by a historic crisis that managed to take Marxism seriously. We need to understand communism and self-conscious independent movement in the mixed majority in the interest of the mixed majority. And to evaluate the debate as a dialectical materialist, you are a historian inquiring to determine the factors behind the one I see. Effective political theory will have an integrated understanding of social practices and guidelines for practice. Social totalities based on inequality of economic access. Secondary contradictions are determined by the fundamental contradictions of capitalism, which is inscribed in relation to capital and labor. Secondary contradictions authorize capitalism without gender, raise discrimination, and thus accept Sunny capitalism. Only orthodox Marxists recognize the historicity of labor as its primary source of all wealth. Emancipatory theory can be founded on the recognition of Marxist theory labor value. And on to case. Deleuze fetishizes the animal and removes it from any subjectivity or political potential. They also detach the concept of the animal for any kind of actual animal means. This allows dominant forms of capitalism and violent political control to fortify their dominance over non-human animals in the guise of becoming animal. Shooting 9. Affect is especially configured as an animal rhizome of brush, triggering the non-voluntary transmutation of being into becoming an opening line of flight out of fixed ontologies. Affect casts a non-voluntary force springing from the irrepressible multiplicity of heterogeneous nature. The concept of becoming animal arguably fetishizes affect with animal alterity that eludes becoming signifying a virtual state of pure potential as opposed to the state of historical actuality. The figure of the animality which is effect is rendered abstract. Affect is an authentic animal alterity is impossible to distinguish from the intensities unleashed by capitalism. And anthropocentric speciesism is the original hierarchy that makes war reasons, sexism, and other reasons possible. The future is not endlessly to repeat the horrors of the past. We need a politics that can respect human life best, that respect more than human life best 17 or best 7. And most key to driving safe Forces behind human thought, psychology, social life, and history, the depressing human has deep roots in the repression of animals. Human domination of animals was the first hierarchical domination laid the groundwork for patriarchy, slavery, warfare, genocide. Human liberation is impossible from animal liberation. Thus, humanism collapses under the weight of logical contradiction. Also, in technology, such as the tools and techniques humans devised for the rational mass confinement and slaughter of animals, were mobilized against human groups in the same end. Human subjugation of animals is the first form of hierarchy and paved the way for all other systems, domination, such as patriarchy, racism, colonialism, anti-Semitism, and the Holocaust. In the shift from nomadic hunting and gathering beds to agricultural practices, humans began to establish their dominance over animals through domestication. Humans began to exploit animals. Humans bred them for desired traits, castrating males to make them more docile to enslave animals with their own property. Human develops technology, such as pins, cage, collars, ropes, chains, binding iron. Slavery emerged in the same region in the Middle East that spawned agriculture. The Western aggressors engaged in warplay before swordplay, vilifying their victims, beasts, filthy animals. Colonialism was natural skin to human supremacy over the animal kingdom. The arguments European colonists used to legitimize exploiting Africans that were less than human and inferior to white humans' ability to see reason are the very same justifications humans used to kill animals. And to bring Deleuzian thought into the basis does nothing but destroy the lines of light that Deleuzian Guattari tried to make available, man 95. The existence and lines of light produced by Deleuze are being shut down and rerouted by the very people who take them most seriously. The nomads artists coming to the Rousseauians and the Orientalism who are already invested in this figure. Whatever Deleuze intended, he is reduced to being a romantic outlaw specific to the state. The sort of dialectical operation Deleuze must despise. The rhizome is just becoming another subterranean figure. Virtual models of maps close off the very exits they indicate. Rhizomes, lines of flight, etc. One and the same time. At the same time, theoretical political devices of the highest critical order, merely fantastic models for writing, thus an instance of blurring distinction between criticism and fantasy. How much time do I have?
You have like 13 seconds. Just say that like the app doesn't like have a clear like.
Okay, the app doesn't have a clear plan. That's bad. I don't have time to set anything.
Okay.
Ready for crossings.
Cool. First on T, what is a concrete demand?
Yeah, so we're talking about, like, our interpretation is that you just need to, like, be engaging the federal government in some way, shape, or form.
Actually, I
So
can say this, like a concrete demand is like having a stable advocacy text or a stable plan text.
So
we
it's
can
like defend U.S. government action.
Our
Not-
interpretation is that you defend a resolution
Okay.
action.
Yeah, that's the interpretation on T,
So
but
if
the
it's
concrete.
resolutional action, then I guess like we would say that we're within the surveillance area of the topic. Right?
I would argue that you are not because you don't deal with like the way warrants work. That's not in relation to the surveillance part of the topic.
How-
Right, like you have one
how
word
is
that's
it
the same
the
as the
best-
topic,
you know-
that doesn't mean that,
you know what,
like, you're in
that's
line
fine.
with it. You're not resolutional action just because you have one word the same.
Yeah. Okay. The case argument. The anthro stuff, I guess. How exactly does the app sort of re-inscribe this fetishization of the animal?
So you're like super reliant on Deleuzian literature and Deleuzian authors, and that theory that like they're putting forward fetishizes the animal and like removes
So
it from
what about the theory that in the app, like counter mapping
Your app,
and
your
counter
use of
surveillance?
Deleuzian
One
theory.
quick sec. If we win that we're actually Latour's actor network theory and you're wrong, do we not link?
I mean, I literally controlled F your document and it's full of like mentions of Deleuze, so either
Right, but is that the method?
I mean,
So it's like your analysis,
Hey,
right?
cool.
It's your Ingram and
Yeah.
Malin analysis. It's
That's
your,
fine.
it's literally
Back-
like your
back-
whole Oliver Twist
Sure.
card.
Back to T. We said the role of the neg is like negation, and negation is key. What about the app trades off with negation?
Yeah, so if you don't have a concrete demand, you don't really have something for us to negate.
yeah. Like,
So you're reading indites of our
Yeah,
our
like-
author of Deleuze. You're reading Cap. You're reading links
Look,
about that.
that's generic stuff. We will argue that like
How
once
specific author indites and indites of their
Also,
theory is generic
let me-
stuff.
Okay, so here's the thing. You're not proposing something for us to negate. The most that you're giving us is like these vague
Yeah.
like K-links that we can like hopefully do
I don't
something
know.
with, right?
I don't know what's vague K-links about it.
So if we read this on the
Like-
neg, are you prepared to debate it on the neg?
Look, if you read this, what do you mean? Why
If
is,
we read this on the neg, would you be prepared as the app to debate it?
if you read this on the neg against like a security app
or, like
Any
or
app.
like
If we read this sort of thing as like a critique or a counterpoint on the neg.
okay, but what would it be a critique of? Like that's like would be my response to you.
Surveillance
And I would say that's
whatever.
The surveillance state? I mean, it's kind of the one I see.
Like, why aren't you prepared to have like generics to this sort of argument?
look, like
Don't have a predictable.
generics aren't the greatest thing in the world. Like
also like we
I mean-
shouldn't have to prepare to defend apps that we
Sure,
haven't
but
made.
shouldn't have to prep.
we should have topic like specific education. Topic specific education is a good thing.
Yeah,
What?
we're part of the topic. It's a surveillance act.
You haven't really defined the topic, which is I guess part of the picture.
I mean that's fine.
Yeah, I'll run a little prep. I'm just gonna read stuff. Oh, I'm fine. listen.
Okay.
Yeah. Stop drop.
I have 7:30.
So they're
Yeah, 230 used. I'm sending like 2 cards. Or 3. They're in the body. Let's just say 2 of the cards. Alright, the order is going to be case with an overview, then down to the speciesism stuff, and the other Deleuze invite, lines of flight stuff, then TCAP.
I need you to say that again. I'm sorry. I was
Sure.
listening.
Case starting with the overview, then the speciesism stuff, then the lines of flight
Okay.
invite, and then T, then cap.
Okay.
Just give me a second, my computer's lining up. Close a window or two. Alright, is that really good?
Yep.
Second.
Sorry, can I have that order one more time?
Yeah, case with an overview, then speciesism, then the other Deleuze indite, then T and cap.
Okay.
Thesis, we are are located within the digital where an individual subjectivity is crafted through metadata, which is violently weaponized in order to deter any and all forms of resistance. FBI targeting of supposed black identity extremists will prove mass surveillance is a means by which control maintains itself. We will win that these actions are not value neutral, but rather coordinated exercises in power designed to preclude the possibility of any and all intelligible resistance. In response to this crisis of action, we forward a method of critical cartographic analysis that reclaims the tools of surveillance and weaponizes them against the surveillance industrial complex through the process of countermapping disparate alternative modes of politics that overload the surveillance state's ability to both manage and respond in advance. You vote affirmative to forward this method of studying surveillance as a constant correction to resistance against mass surveillance. We'll isolate two impacts. One is algorithmic governance, which is the capturing of subjectivity transformed into metadata. Access becomes granted through a threat level checklist where resistance is not only preempted but resolved in advance. That makes top-down methods of resistance futile. Second is disaster capitalism and endless intervention. Surveillance thrives on the crisis insofar as perceived threats exist, so too will crisis. Therefore, we must become unintelligible in our resistance. This looks like disaster capitalism, which puts forward capitalism's fundamental critique, the inability to ever sufficiently resolve, reform sufficiently to solve a problem or a recreation of a new disaster and the solution of a previous. This is used to justify sacrificial zones like the nuclear weapon testing at Bikini Atoll and Yucca Mountain. A calculative politics is put to work to establish the least resistant population to be extinguished so the state can avoid the threat to the national security from a foreign other. And material skills, knowledge, and political culture reform is a predicated on having the right credentials. Algorithmic governance is a means to access reform as always given to those deemed safe reformers. And McConney explains that policy will always be incomplete. Resolving the drive to risk is a prior question. The political is occupied by technology, which creates exclusion, culminating in internalization of all critique. The app is the only way to reverse the logical polarity of power within the digital. So the process of knowing is not weaponized against resistance like through mechanisms like the academy. The app is not an insertion into the academy, but rather a method of moving through it. And down to speciesism. Human exceptionalism pervades the alternative called ethics. Inevitably reestablishing the human as the center of their politics means the all fails, links to itself. It means any critique of Deleuze inherently links to itself. Bodice in 11. Humans have to accept that ethics makes us exceptional, or are call to time on ethics for those who work in ecology or animal studies leads them to reject human exceptionalism at the heart of the central paradox. The human is an animal. At the same time, the aforementioned fields of study come with an article of ethical errors. It becomes inescapable. The denial of human exceptionalism until the end of ethical prescription. We must focus on anthropocentrism. Not the great evil is to be eliminated, but rather the problem to be embraced and directed. For if there is any insistence ethics should be not anthropocentric, will produce any and all ethical authority of a blank page. Our insights will penetrate deeper if we agree that the writer of an ethical treatise began their work because they're human. Man marks the distinction. This is not an anthropocentrism as prejudice, but anthropocentrism as non-optional starting point. A work may be constructed against the anthropocentric worldview, but its starting point will be no less anthropocentric. Also, we say all lines of flight get co-opted. That's why we're not straight Deleuzian. It probably just proves their other argument. We're trying to expurgate lines of death and explain them. Down to T. The apples material in the burden is on the negative to prove otherwise. Have a high threshold on any arguments about unpredictability proving we are material, since Oliver says our app can and does have real material solutions as shown in the true square evidence. Oliver explains that the use of technical devices as a means of resistance and protest are key that also are possible. Also, given the new prevailing conditions of late capital so far, the app resolves more unidentifiable strategies will always be more material than predictable co-opted strategies. Weigh the app solvency on determining materiality. A material locus is impossible. Technocracy overcodes engagement with positive reform results in a sort of materialist groupthink that blinds the negative co-option means you vote app on presumption. That's the 1AC, the corrupted evidence. They've proven themselves incapable of any thought beyond consumption. That's Forrest and 13. The temporal isolation and experience of fragmentation and characteristic of reduction exode in the superficial distracting mode of perception fostered by the mainstream media. No one is trusted to remember anything that's already been happening or concentrate upon anything other than what's presented to them in a given moment. The consumer is thus reduced to an abstract presence, someone who is incapable of exercising thought. And material change doesn't happen through talking to your senator. The self-imposed captivity created through surveillance means that no policy action always results in violence and co-option, and access and debate is assumed to be value neutral. This is empirically false, which means you should presume that we restrict We restrict government surveillance through countermapping. Wood says we create space which enables people to contest and circumvent surveillance assemblages. Also, they don't have a violation, so presume app. There's no reason to reject us. That supercharges the we need arguments. They shouldn't get to read a new one in the 2NC because that's the excuse the debate and sandbag for 1AR, which is unfair. And this is my partner's first ever K debate, which means it's extremely unfair. Also, group their any interpretation claims they make. If we win our critique of mass surveillance operating through deterrence or resistance, and we win any topical action becomes a rearticulation of power via control that we are winning an impact turn to. And demands on the state lead to destruction. That what I see is 9 minutes offense. If we win our thesis claim, then we've won an impact turn to this. The transparency test that the logic of predictability presupposes an adherence to norms that replicate the surveillance industrial complex wherein compliance is forced and deviations that are deterred and violently eliminated. That was in the overview. Limits puts an arbitrary boundary on what is and is not sufficiently within the scope of the resolution. That has 3 impacts. One leads to a critique of algorithmic governance, wherein value is assigned via checklists. And second, the checks and abuse. Critiques of the surveillance state that the core of the topic means we, even when we're out, they should be still prepared to debate it, turn and switch side and limits. they didn't have an answer for this in cross-sex, and it was really embarrassing. Third, they don't have a right line to explode limits. If the F is sufficient to explode limits, then K debate doesn't exist. Also, prefer unintelligibility. We've made a thesis claim about the nature of surveillance, both mitigating and backlashing against easily identifiable methods of resistance, the impact of digital enclosure, the white sea weaponize the tools of surveillance via counter-mapping, forming into disparate modes of alternative politics that overload the surveillance state's ability to both manage and respond, which is an impact that neither their interp or any alternative they present can resolve, as it maintains the linkages to the networks of intelligibility where winning impact turns to. So they also don't have a limiter on their interp. They don't define what is concrete or how concrete. Ask these questions. White evidence seems to be going affirmative. Make them explain before holding us to their standard of materiality. Also, onto Cal. Really simple. They say use the master's tools. We say use the right tools because the master only leaves out the tools he wants you to use. Their answer is going to be prior question, root cause, no alternative. We got to use the tools we have. Our answer is they aren't creative enough. We'll create new tools. Permutation to the app is a first step towards making Marxist revolutionaries imperceptible. Permutation to the app. They've conceded the first line of the creative evidence, which talks about how Marxist critiques of commodity don't understand the way the connections exist between discourse and the actors, actions of both the state and non-state actors. Also, the app only the app can claim to solve the claims of territory, which act as a sort of manifest destiny, which promulgates the expanding global capital, which makes the Afro prerequisite. Neoliberal globalism is empowered and constructed through hierarchies of surveillance technologies which demarcate lines of flight. It's not a question of the root cause of desire, but rather the foundational structure of enforcement of scalar politics under the globalization, which structures exchangeability. Wooden 13. The rise of control society provides the conditions of neoliberalism to be seen as a solution to crisis. Neoliberalism is analogous to the control society attempts to intertwine globalize neoliberalism. They further provide surveillance now detached from state structures. This has revealed the sovereign powers neither inherently territorial nor state-bound. Sovereignty is a contingent that applies to any mode of ordering construction of global equality, rather became a discourse of resources and politics and neoliberalization at the scale. Surveillance operates to monitor the forming contours of global quality. Surveillance is an enforcement mechanism in the scale of politics and neoliberalization, ensuring the global is seen as the normal or natural space of neoliberal governmentality. And I'm gonna finish the card from the wedding scene. I probably didn't finish. Unless there's something else you want me to read, Logan.
No.
Alright, cool. You started management?
Yeah.
Unruly social nature refuses to participate within this contested complex of forms of biopolitics and responsibilization that make certain social nature thrive. The neoliberal eco-governmentality seeks to create external incentive structures within which the individuals understood as self-interested rational actors can be motivated to exhibit appropriateness behaviors through manipulation of incentives instead of producing utility maximizing homo economicus. However, environmentality produces profit maximizing subjects who respond to their systemic modification introduced into their environment. So when I was talking about under perm do the app, I meant the null card, not the preemptive card, sorry. 1 second. Oh, when they make the claim about how Deleuze fetishizes the concept of the animal to remove it from subjectivity or political potential, we don't make a claim about how we don't make a claim about how Deleuze positions the animal or the human subject. We should not have to defend all of his literature base, nor all of his work. We don't just rely on Deleuze, we rely on Latour too, and plenty of other authors. You shouldn't hold us to their entire lit base. They don't have any reason why this uniquely links to the affirmative action, or why it links to the plan. Do you have something you want to read?
Just read this in the alt. Okay.
Yeah. Go to the K. Marxism reproduces the system of capitalist exchange by commodifying the theory of commodity itself. The Marxist focus is a means of production, props up the structuring principle of consumerist exchange, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of exploitation. Also, they said Tumino was more of a communist than Marx, so this definitely links. Rufo and 7. System analysis, while the critical power of systems exchange value. Marxist analysis, commodity links, comes to kind of theoretical commodity, something we used to make class papers, the arguments look good. Marx is a lot more problem than just forgetting about not predicting the importance of society value. Marx goose up badly because he naturalized labor. I mean, he makes it seem like an absolute capitalist will simply labor like he likes to labor, and he likes to labor because he being useful or liking producing things with use value. Mark the card use value.
I'll send that out.
Yep.
I'm ready.
We're gonna wait on that card.
Oh, sure.
Where is that? It's
T, how are you you said you were resolution, but how? Because you deal with surveillance?
We talk about restricting the ability for the executive to undertake surveillance against people. You also don't have a violation, so
Okay, so,
shouldn't be held to
okay,
that.
well, my partner read a violation and may not have.
What was it?
It was
That you don't defend resolution action.
yeah.
Where?
So,
I said it at the start before I started reading with Michelle, and I read it at the very end of the speech.
Okay.
so, with that in mind, how do you specifically deal with the bulk incidental collection of all or nearly all foreign intelligence information on United States persons without a warrant?
Where did you read any evidence in the 1C that said
No, I'm asking because I'm on.
Yeah, we don't think we have to be held to that interpretation. We think there's multiple interpretations of the topic. We think ours is better, and you have not.
How is
That's literally, he just read the topic.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
just read.
where did you say 702 in your 1C? Like, how are we supposed to know that? You can't cross-examine me on these standards.
So we have to specify 702. Why would we?
Well,
have
that's
to,
what you just said in your explanation of the
okay,
topic,
Okay, moving on.
and you didn't say that in the
Moving on,
1C. So
you
you're
said
gonna just
like we.
Send it back.
Alright, on T, you say we've proven ourselves incapable of any thought beyond consumption. Could you explain this Forest 13 card to me?
Yeah, so you make the claim that like a material locus is necessary and possible. We would say that that is always going to be predicated on a capitalist drive to production, and the idea that concentrating on engaging with or making possible engagements with the state is always going to be predicated on like an experience of fragmented characteristics of production.
So is the state always bad?
We don't make a claim as to whether the state is bad or good. We say it's inevitable, and that's what the F confronts.
Okay, so then why not make demands upon the state?
Because we say that those demands fail absent the AFS method. Like, you could use the AFS method
Okay,
and
so
demand.
did the abolitionists demand for an end to slavery fail when they demanded that upon the
That
state?
sounds really isolated and violent, but I don't know why that's a good example.
Did when people demanded gay marriage, did that demand fail?
That failed for a ton of years, and a lot of people
Okay, but
experienced
the
serious
demand eventually
resentment.
ended up succeeded. So these are like clear-
No, it didn't, because there's still like violence against LGBTQ
Okay.
people.
All right, moving on. So
It's a palliative to continue
okay, on
like
count, how does
predatory
specifically how
practices.
does Marxist theory
Activists.
reproduce consumption?
Because, okay, are you talking about the card he read at,
Yeah.
had me read at the end? Can you explain? I didn't read it. One of the arguments was that he overdetermines like the way capital works, and like is focused on that singular modifier of the way, I guess, like he says that wage labor is predicated on an explanation of capital that's always focused on the worker, and we would say that the worker is not always in the same subject position outside of like the explanation that you get.
Okay. All of
But
these.
surveillance also is a unique ontology claim.
Can you use a few minutes?
Yep, we're gonna run first.
So everything
Sorry.
back.
Try to tune in because that's what they read. Yeah, okay, you're fine. Did you save that card? Or is that the one below it in the file?
It's in the file.
Yeah, okay. That's fine. I've never read
read. Right, what's your order?
It's going to be a framework, or not framework, T.
Any cards?
Yeah, I'm sending them. Just give me a minute. Could I be like an overview at this moment? Is everybody ready? The impermanence interpretation fails to answer the basic question of argument. What is debate for? What makes debate any different from late night libraries used to holding political rally, taking independent city? The best answer to the question is the role of the negative. The only way to challenge received wisdom, to think new thoughts and embrace new values, is to have opponents who negate those assumptions that we do not even that we have from the divine right to King's heteronormative negation. Is the only way we can come to see even new problems in the first place. Debate is a formalization of this process, which is why only our interpretation can create a meaningful role about it. If any of their interpretations of valid are solved by writing your decision on a different piece of paper, then you can do that and still vote negative ballot for the affirmative is meaningless without the negative ballot. Paradox and another interpretation, and the impact of authoritarianism and injustice will isolate several distinct attacks to making negation impossible. One is turns the app. They lock in their movements, confirmation plans, and block internal critique. Empirically, this replicates oppression. That's Davis 5. The exos learning the failure address homophobia on black women's organization was an enormous awful analysis of black national discourse. Points out that its appeal helped African nation unity, but served to discourage deeper disengagement of the black patriarchy. That's a great likelihood. These lead to running the radical potential organizing out of organizations, experiencing merchants of radical transformation, and determined to preserve difference, diversity, even conflict, and a very process of building unity. And two, strategic capacity. Poor deliberation leads to failure. Single tactics of the 1AC are less important than capacity building for multiple future challenges. That's Gans 9. You have to be sustainable. The AFL-CIO failed to have to deliberation became venture for learning strategic capacity, makes success more probably greater on an organization to gain the more informed creative response to its change and better able to take advantage of the unique property because the unknown is by definition a big factor and we often can't and give them until we can act any single tactic that has limited influence and discussion strategy. I refer to a whole series of tactics that which try to maintain into long term in the structure of legitimate power and the relationship interaction what everything touches on establishes each structure have a profound influence on civil behavior that they conduct regular open and authority delivering and divide strategy benefits and center justly from members' knowledge and motivation that organization which alone rate to decide strategy cannot the pursuit of a variety of team members linked to diversity and constitutes able team to only change the circle split motivation enhancement number can contribute to sustain and create the deliver positive challenging particular practices that's required to preserve diverse perspective for bringing together ways to make decisions that encourage differentiating must allow for convergence thinking because negotiation voting and collective action possible preserving differences and skip the next few cards. And onto the line with win. And their offenses on play, our interpretation top legally is minimal one. We do not mandate a single way of relating to the resolution. They can conceive of themselves as protesters, policymakers, activists, anarchists using the state to actively destroy the president of the United States, Lord, I think people longer in the other infinite ways and individuals ways to the government. They make framework debates that out empirically framework and Marxism are the only core generics that are reliable strategies against non-topical gas, and teams regularly make conscious active decisions to debate framework rather than dissents and counterpoints. And then this also is like they aren't like resolutional because they keep on saying they deal with surveillance and the president's ability to like conduct surveillance on people, but first you are no way like engaging the state or making a demand on the state to restrict the president's authority, and two, surveillance is an incredibly broad topic that is independently its own topic, like it was in high school a few years ago, and the resolution is very particular in the way it wants you to deal with surveillance. That's why it's bulk collection. We don't have to spec that in the T-shell. To have to actually go and just read the resolution in the T-shell is a ridiculous idea. You should know what the resolution is by now. It's very specific, and then you have to deal with bulk incidental collection of foreign data on the United States citizens without a warrant. It doesn't just mean surveillance as a whole field of its own. That's not in the direction of the resolution left. And this is not only good for the neg, it's also better for athletes. Full rights active champions are making it affable and effective to achieve their own goals since 2018. Although counter-proposals through media doesn't really mean that anyone beyond their own evidence paying any attention to counter-proposals, which certainly may contribute because they are often supposed to counter-resistant and show their position begin true counter-proposals can be talking to themselves. There's unfriendly information over too many options, not too many options. If they're going to contribute to bring in mandatory social change, they need to win recruit social positive. A recruitment becomes more difficult when fragmented publicly characterized by diversion communities. And so I'm going to move on to like this stuff about how this making demands on the state never works. One, that's just simply untrue. Abolitionists back in the 1800s made demands upon the state for them to get rid of slavery, and that worked out. And we, LGBT people made demands upon the state for gay marriage to become accepted and become legal in the United States. Yes, there's still ongoing violence on queer people and against black people. Just because there's ongoing violence doesn't mean that we haven't made progress by making those demands upon the state. We still make progress, it's still possible to make progress, and this these two examples, along with the countless other examples of social justice movements making demands upon the state, prove that you can do that and you can be successful and that can make your movement. And also you can extend from the one NC here the white 2016 card. So they say first that we don't spec what a concrete demand is, but what we mean by a concrete demand is having a solid or having a stable advocacy text, having a stable plan text that says what you're doing. And the white 16 card actually specifically critiques the movement they used as an example for their philosophy. It says that the reason Occupy Wall Street failed was because Occupy Wall Street doesn't have a clear demand. So if they want their movement to succeed and they want surveillance to be gone, they need a clear demand upon the state for that movement, or they need a clear demand for that to succeed. This is an independent reason to vote neg, because otherwise we just lead to serial failure, and their movement ends up never getting critiqued by others from outside the movement, so they never successfully improve upon that movement, and they never actually, come to a better advocacy or a better way of dealing with the problems in society. So moving back to the doc, and onto this question of ground good is not good enough. They're amazingly generic, totally unpredictable, negative ground conflates extremely diverse arguments. The you should be prepared by now arguments are false for anti-blackness, debates alone. Wilderson, Oten, Wheatley, Warren, Lord, Hooks, Mills, Black nationalism, racial realism, Afro-Western, intersectionality, African womanism, racial contract and queerness. These are well-established authors who draw distinctions between their own position and others, sometimes with and sometimes without explicitly disagreeing. All these authors is not even the work of an entire dissertation, it's the work of a lifetime subject from his empirically exploited the difference between the artists gain a strategy you get advantage up to and including in lay outrounds of the NTP. This means you should never invert the burden and negation is necessary, and certainty is bad. You should prefer an interpretation that makes it harder to be apt and the negative danger flows in the opposite direction. There's sufficient arguments. This again just goes back to they said, oh, you read Cap and you read Deleuze and Dykes, but first Deleuze and Dykes again are incredibly generic argument that I could apply to any app that deals with Deleuze. And again, Marxism itself, you can practically find a Marxist link or a link to Cap for almost any app out there, is it really an app if it doesn't link to CAP? And so, like, these are just generic arguments, and the reason teams consistently go for framework and consistently go for capitalist or Marx or capitalist critiques is because these are the only reliable generics you have against these kind of apps. Most of the people debating do not have the time to go through and read all these theories and to like find actual disas and find actual counterplans and actually engage with the theory on that level because there's simply no time. So it's better to focus on the topic and go to this interpretation that we must like have a minimal adherence to the resolution and be in the direction of the resolution and engage with the state in one of the many ways that we pointed out that they could. So we have a stable topic and we have stable ground upon which we can engage affirmative teams and like have topic specific education, which is better instead of just having the same Deleuze debates or the same aim debates over and over again year after year. Do you have anything you want me to say?
Without engagement, we can't actually make positive
change. Without what makes debate a unique space and what makes it different compared to other forms of political engagement is that we get to negate it, and that allows us to create better movements, and that allows us to learn more. Without that, debate has no real value because that's what makes it debate unique and the way we argue and the way we handle the space. You good? Yeah. Oh wait, actually, give me a second. I'm ready now.
Okay. Why are more debates about restricting surveillance bad?
Let's say again.
You said that more debates over the years, Deleuze, such and such, like that's all bad. Why?
I didn't say those debates are bad. I'm saying that like
that proliferation is bad. Why?
I'm saying like topic specific education and like actually engaging with the topic is a better form of education.
Why is
I'm not necessarily saying.
Let's even talk specifically about this topic. Why is education around bulk data collection so important?
You are not bulk data collection.
I know. Why is that education that you say you are missing out of so important that all K debate should basically just be like tossed aside?
I really don't get what you're asking. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
That's really the foundation of your T flow. Why does topicality outweigh the AF's education?
Because like it goes back to this question of making negation possible. What makes debate a unique state?
Why is that important or valuable?
Because it's better for you. It's better for
Why
you.
is it better for us?
Because as we read that it's down a question of blocking in your movement's confirmation bias and blocking out internal.
Okay, you have misread the AF. We're not trying to be Occupy Wall Street or break down surveillance. Why is it good for us?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Your only explanation for why it was good for us is to like refine our movement to break down surveillance. We're not Occupy Wall Street. We're not trying to break down surveillance. We say it's
alright, but you used Occupy Wall Street as an example of your methodology.
As an example of a failed methodology because it was co-opted. We say all methodologies are inevitably co-opted.
Okay.
The AF is an interspersed.
And then we also make arguments about like how it's better for you to have concrete demands upon the state.
Okay.
And how like those can lead to change, and then like the reason.
Let's get into that a little bit more. You said that framework debates, when non-topical apps are a thing, make it so there's no policy action. Like a policy debate, like if we read a quote-unquote topical app right now, like a policy ad, Defense 702, you read your 5 Ives this ad or whatever. Why is that policy education so important to these sort of broad sweeping claims you make about being able to be like good policy educators and engage with the state and shit like that?
Because like the education is, I mean, like having this policy education.
The education's good because the education's good.
I'm not sure
what is
like,
the value we get from like a trade debate? What is the value we get from like
we
a news
learn
debate?
more about that subject and we become better.
In what areas? In what ways?
Why is
what
it
education?
uniquely important?
I didn't know a lot about 702 before this topic, but now that I know, I understand a lot more about 702 and the way it works. Like having that kind of knowledge and becoming a better informed citizen is a good thing.
So like, are you saying that your model's better because people go out and like vote against 702? Or like, what is the end point of that?
To become better policymakers and to become better educators. Like
You said
Yeah, let me send
Like,
the doc.
can I have like 10 seconds with you?
Sure. Okay, but I'm over here then, so
Alright.
you can talk.
Looking for players.
Starting prep now.
You can take all the prep.
Okay, that's good. We're good.
Alright, I'm sending case. Or sending the doc. Alright, should be sent.
What's the order?
Order is gonna be cat, then might touch on case. Alright. Starting. Oh wait, you have the doc, yeah? Okay, starting. Now, capitalism is driven to a crisis by the contradiction between competing individual interests and finite resources. That's our foster card. A. Results in desperate energy imperialism, rising production costs, risks irrational escalation of nuclear conflict, and B. Destroys the environment. Short-term profit trumps long-term ecology, causes random evolution, species extinction, and climate change. And our negative case arcs that prior to the advances extend to medium. Flawed method produces social antagonism and crises, nullifying the long-term effects of the plan. Prefer theoretical coherency over stopgap fixes. And onto framework. Your decision is not between competing policy options, but historical outlooks. Extend to medium. Dialectical materialism is best. First, for pregnancy. Life is determined by wealth. Our experiences are ordered by the economic conditions we were born into. States of consciousness are intelligible only through the prior causes. The app is futile without prior theorization of social totality because it overlooks the systemic necessity of their impacts. And universality. Totalizing theory is more productive. It allows for inclusive coalition building versus theories of power. Particularism causes internal dissent which quashes political potency and disattach the perm. And ideology. Capital imposes epistemological blind spots which bankrupt their decision making. Causes us to dismiss radicalism and submit to the confines of the status quo. Their impacts of propaganda should be ignored. Only dialectical critique allows for the production of truly objective knowledge. And we are the only alternative extent to Mino. Our task is to achieve the intellectual conditions for revolution, not the revolution itself. Their stubborn pragmatism conceals a fetish for the system universalism shatters this. Don't support. The fetish is by claiming to some object endowed with disproportionate significance is able to appear as pragmatic realist fetishists are able to accept the way things are since they have their fetish to cancel the effect of reality. If the salaries of small various techno-gadget tools in today's capitalist society are taken away, the pretense for being realistically accepting of the status quo will be dropped immediately. And history is not over. We can represent the global majority of correct by capital. A fairly revolutionary politics is not a historical necessity. We can still win. This is in response to the card that they ran on case, or on Cap last card. Murphy had all four. Groups are becoming restless. The ideological markets become stale. History only ends when there are no more persons left to decide their own fate. The powerful and their supporters scream when their challenges are irrational and doomed to fail. Failures have nothing to do with the political laws of the history of human nature. They occur because the rich want to discredit alternatives to undermine their privileges. And there's no alt to Cap is the real. Saying there's no alt to Cap is the real utopian fantasy. Prefer dialectical theory. Jump support. The demise of capitalism is an unavoidable historical necessity, and a system particularly the abandonment of the end of history appears to be utopian. Given the merciless march of history, believing that an ultimate insurpassable socio-political arrangement has finally arrived is almost impossible. Capitalism must eventually give way to something else, even if this acts not being envisioned clearly from the present truth. Like that is, they say that like Marx still like buys into capitalist theory, but like we have to do something. Thinking of a utopian manner is an imperative for survival. The risk that we don't actually actualize anything is outweighed by the risk that we do. Season 4. But what characterizes utopia is the construction of utopic stance outside the existing parameters where it appears to be possible. Utopian changes the coordinates of the possible. Something we are pushed to is a matter of survival when it is no longer possible to win within the possible. And we have an ethical obligation to reject capital. Economic calculus understands destructive power. Dally 4. Our ethical political responsibility is to confront capitalism. We should not lose sight of the systemic power of capital in shaping our very sense of the possible. In order to create a universal system, importance capitalism to steal the political discussion violence of destruction. Capitalism depends on a disavowed violence that excludes vast sectors of the world population of the human cost in terms of global quality and degraded life chances cannot be calculated within existing economic rationale. Such exclusion remains mystified and nameless. And on the PERN vote after reject capital, the PERN just invites a discussion of the links. We will win several. There's a difference between voting negative and voting affirmative. Even when you vote for an alt on the CP, voting negative is always a vote against the app. There's no way you can vote against capital by voting app. And onto the permanent vote. Marxism requires universalized class theory. Extend tribunal. Any use of link over one's word by solvency by eluding his vision of society with ideological commitments to the status quo. Either permalinks or severance. It's bad because it forgoes argumentative responsibility, doesn't consider intellectual strategy, doesn't justify voting out. All social connections are underwritten by neoliberal labor relations. Nothing less than total criticism can run inequality. Our epistemology arguments mean that there's no net benefit to the perm, but flawed knowledge of the 1AC are incompatible with the also revolutionary potential. And fetishizing particularity dooms the act. In the age of imperialism, where's the choice between comprehensive Marxist history or opportunist myopia? Lukács 67. The moment you abandon totality, you jettison the starting point and the goal, the assumption, and the requirements of the dialectical method. Revolution will be understood not as part of the process, but an isolated act cut off from the general. The whole system of Marxism stands fall with the principle that the category is totally dominant. One has to either choose to regard the whole history of society from a Marxist view and to come to grips with the phenomenon of imperialism, or else evade this by confining oneself to the isolated aspects. Apply this to the card that they read on case. I don't remember the name. But they can't solve the residual links because anything short of wholesale rejection is a sellout. The threshold link only has to be infinitesimally small to warrant a total rejection of the as political method. Ideological apologia for particular elements naturalize the system as a whole. Card 12. Religion provides illusory happiness for real suffering, providing a spiritual aroma for capitalism helps to ideologically class and culturally adjust exploited workers to interest. The call to abandon illusion, the call to abandon a condition which requires illusion. It is in the material interest of capital to provide immaterial and spiritual resolution to deflect attention away from the economic and maintain social bonds for the necessity of exploitation. And some more links. Curtailing surveillance only masks neoliberalism, maintaining the shift to privatized surveillance. Bird 15. Private entities are working within concert with the police to create a mostly privatized quasi-surveillance state. Rights cannot be outsourced out of existence with the continued privatization of government functions. Neoconservatives exploit crisis to advance neoliberal policies, so the Republic remains too distraught to be caught up in the disasters effectively to resist those policies. Detroit desperately increased reliance on private security and private-public partnership in monitoring dissenters provides a model backdrop to the kind of crisis capitalism works across the United States. The ranks of privatized forces continue to surge, working public sector for police throughout the nation. Concept result in an overall shift to private policing. Private security firms infringe on the protective activities. The numbers of security guard continue to climb. The security industry is driven by efficiency, threats, and liability. A closer look at the industry reveals that guards only receive a fraction of the training required for municipal cops. The private security industry is poorly regulated. And the affirmatives of counter-surveillance trades off with a material institutional analysis. They constrain alternatives to shallow reforms by rejecting a basis of overarching structural change of social organization. Smith 14. Extended popular debate challenges fundamental social, political, and economic system response to the mass surveillance forming mechanism in the first place. This is the question when we must answer. This, of course, isn't so much about fundamental system change, but rather becomes trapped in and making mass surveillance less repulsive. Reform and inclination can be explained in part through analysis of the logic of the system of capital. Under capitalism, capital laid a foundation for society where the political economy influences individuals and manufacturers' consent. The exhibit of good society, for example, leads toward an actual egalitarian democracy because the interest of the dominant governing system which produces and reproduces the epistemic consciousness of its own reality. Protest groups that specifically focus on protesting against state-sponsored mass surveillance relies a sufficient theoretical framework and maintain the status quo. Tipping the scales of powers away from the intelligence community seems to lack sufficient awareness of fundamental critique of political economy. Compartmentalized from a broad structure of critique modern society, or therefore loses revolutionary potential or potential supplement grassroots efforts social transformation.
Okay, we have 7:30 starting now. going to be case, then app, then T. So we're good. The current world we live in is one where individuals become digital. Facebook updates, big change in the world. So glad to be here. The mass monitoring and regulation of policing individuals become an integral part of society. This is not the result of predetermined structures like semicolonialism, but rather because the way is normalized and advanced on an interpersonal level through constantly disassembled or reassembled bodies. Two impacts. One, according to the governance, digital surveillance works to see people's data doubles, which distorts the identity and possibility for greater desire individual societies, rendering zero real agency beyond predetermined participation in consumer markets. Surveillance divides and assigns individual threat scores. You can think of these like credit scores that makes individuals either dangerous and therefore necessary to die, or safe in a way to harvest desire for consumer ends. And two, neoliberal intervention. Frequent laws remedy society through legal terms that serve as a minor reconfiguration of surveillance assemblage in order to dole out token reform. This looks like an attempt at development through urban gentrification, which instead pushes poor folk out of homes and into ghettos. The app endorses critical cartography. This enables politics of unintelligibility through diffuse strategies or articulating or vandalized evidence, such as the movement into Here Square that turned the scoping the state back in on itself by doing things like posting fake Facebook meetups and mislead the ops, using ways to chart police movements, that saying about protest through prohibited Tor browsing, which allows us to turn the state scoping technologies on their head, re-enabling radical leaderless democratic movements that overload the state to escape the digital policing. All of that I just described is definitely also a material action, which is something that is going to meet a lot of the T-flow. And I'll do the general role of ballot stuff that they've been doing. The role of the judge is an educator, not a historian. It means you go for the model that offers the best path to education around negative state action and how to deal with that. And even if you give them their role about that, it's history first. We need it better because government surveillance involves countless acts of material violence through marginalized bodies, through these examples that we're giving throughout this debate, which means that it's definitely something that comes first. Cap. They really don't understand the app, which shows because they haven't read one cap link that actually relates. The app is not a reduction of state surveillance power or curtailing of surveillance. The methods for an individual to avoid detection and subvert the material violence they face on the security state. The first two links are in the context of political engagement to challenge the state directly through policy and head-on action. But the app works within the inevitable state to avoid the violence and circumvent it through countermapping, which is much different. It's not a direct contestation, is what they are saying is the sort of trade-off, but rather it's that sort of process that I've described well. And the third link is also bad because it's talking about how investment in egalitarian democracies and these other sort of material, large-scale first things are failures. But again, that's not what the app. And they they've conceded the ontology claim about how everyone has a second identity crafted in data. That means surveillance will always map and destroy co-op resistance absent permutation. The app is the only way for the alt to solve. We agree the cap is bad, and that's the crisis card in the one I see. App isn't in opposition to breaking down capital, but a critique of the method they choose to do it, and they've conceded the net benefit to the perm. You ignore starting points. The available tools are always constructed by surveilling capital to limit the resistance how they see fit. You can vote on no link or the perm resolving any residual link and presume the app. Because surveillance is never rule, which has been conceded out of the 1AC and through the block, the app is a strategy to navigate the surveillance and create small spaces for resistance, which is also a sort of indite on their sort of large-scale link framing, which doesn't even exist. Independently from this, they also somehow bafflingly conceded the indite we had to orthodox Marxian theory, in that Marx sort of reinscribed these sort of value statements on the worker and the ability of how his sort of framing of that logics is sort of reinscribes the idea of capitalism in itself and recreate some of those material violences. So, I mean, that's just another reason the alt fails, and they definitely don't have a link. Anything else, Nick?
No, you're good.
Okay. Framework. Reading bad arguments on framework is an excuse for not being prepared. The app is yes, we relate to the resolution. The surveillance part of the topic is not we are not literally bulk data collection, but offer instead a strategy to survive throughout that sort of surveillance. The most damning part is in cross-ex of the 2NC, when there is not a single moment or a single warrant that they can give you about why the sort of policy education that their model incentivizes is better or even good in the first place. They don't have any sort of justification for why learning about 702 bulk bulk data collection under Section 702 is able to go out and stop the sort of violences that the state does after that, which means that you should prefer the sort of methodology of the app, which is conceded out of the block and at least put some faith into sort of the system that we described. They said that we make framework debates inevitable, but that's but one, it's probably a good thing because education around critical theories and approaches to different real-world policy actions are an alternative lens that many people don't consider in the first place. The education from K debates is not a bad education, but rather it's a alternative form that people can otherwise get to if they don't understand that. And they said that surveillance is broad. They said there is specific bulk data collection, but we don't get meaningful education from those because of the sort of stuff in cross-sex that goes on. They also say, they don't have a violation. They're going to say they do, but like they don't read a violation in the 1NC. There isn't a sort of specific one for that, which is just another reason that you should sort of act when it comes to that.
Without a stable interpretation of the resolution, we cannot have a stable ground to debate.
Yeah, without a stable relation to the resolution, we can't have a stable debate. And the proliferation of the app that they describe is solvency. They're wrong about Occupy because surveillance is ubiquitous. You can't run and hide. You can only create small spaces of effective resistance, and the app makes that possible by mapping the way which they've conceded. Think of the Dapple fake Facebook locations. It worked for a week but prevent hundreds of arrests, giving them time for activists to resist. And they say singular tactic fails, but there's no link. On the top of the 2AC, we said we forward multiplicities of disparate tactics, not one single method. Also, it's about content over form. They don't have a reason why their education is uniquely key, so you presume that because the value of our revolutionary content outweighs. And they said confirmation bias, but that's checked by communal negotiation and discussion. The Oliver card. They need to win a bias towards our method to activism, not to have offense. They also said that the concrete framing is independent voter. We are concrete. They don't have the 2NC is just a re-articulation of what they already said. We're stable advocacy. We don't change, and we are a material engagement, which is what I did above on the overview. They don't change to we meet that, and it's not an independent reason to vote neg because we are a material focus and something that you can.
They don't have an interpretation that says materiality is state engagement.
Yeah. They don't have an interpretation.
We have 408.
Yeah,
turn. You might want these back, by the way.
No cards?
Nope, no new cards. Kind of too late for that anyway.
What shot?
So it's cap, briefly, case, T. On cap first, the permits on advocate so they don't get any offense off it. We're not going through this play. You can kick it. And on to case first, since they brought up stuff from the T flow, onto here, I'm going to do that as well. They did a bunch of new stuff on the flow. The 1AR is too late to clarify what the role of the judge should be. They tried to clarify this, or they tried to like make a role of the judge argument in the 1AR, but that wasn't in the 2AC. It's too late to be making that kind of argument. So you can reject their like interpretation, like prefer our role. Prefer like our interpretation that And they also tried to clarify what their advocacy is, but first of all, this isn't a stable advocacy text. Our interpretation of the white 16 card is that you have to have a stable advocacy text in the 1AC that does not change throughout the debate, but your interpretation of like what this countermapping movement means has changed throughout the debate. First in 1AC cross, they said that the Occupy Wall Street movement was an example of their movement, and then in like 2NC cross, they tried to say it wasn't an example, and then in 1AR cross, they finally gave a few examples of what countermapping means, but none of this is a stable advocacy text, and this only proves the white 16 argument about how they do not have a single concrete demand, and they do not have a single stable advocacy that they can use to actually prefer this movement. And once again, this is an independent reason to vote neg, because this means that their movement doesn't actually do anything, and it's not like they don't do anything, they just continually lock in the cycle, their movement fails, and this kind of thinking and this kind of way of thinking about political strategy just leads to inevitable failure. So like, that's it first, that's an independent reason to vote neg on T. And then moving on to T. T. First, we're going to go ahead and move the confirmation, but once again clarifying, we say that the, first we do have a violation. My partner specifically said they do not meet our interpretation, and that may not have been in the doc, but you shouldn't just be flowing off of the doc. You should be flowing everything it says. Just because it wasn't on the doc, it doesn't mean anything. Anyway, so we do have a violation, so you can extend. The violation, and you can also extend the interpretation. That is Erickson al 3. Our interpretation is minimalist. All we ask is that they defend resolutional action. This means they can relate to the government in any of the different ways that we listed off, whether it be policymakers, whether it be advocates, anarchists using the text to destroy the President of the United States, Congress, the Supreme Court, whatever. They can do it in any of those ways. And it's a voting issue for two reasons. First, extend Alpha and DHTK. Debate is a unique space because we have the role of the negative, and we negate the affirmative, and this allows them to improve upon their argumentation and improve upon their skills and improve upon their movement. Without them, we do not have what makes debate a unique site, and that it helps us become better advocates, better policymakers, better whatever, so we become better as people and better as educators, and without that, debate means nothing. It has no value. That's once again another reason to vote neg. And second is the role of the ballot. Your ballot is meaningless absent the possibility of negation. This is our role of the ballot argument. You can extend Matthew 17, easy decisions where the neg has no ground and they have to go through these super generic arguments like Marxism and framework. Those debates are meaningless, so that's our role of the ballot, that we need to have a good interpretation of negation, and we need to have the role of negation being a possibility, because that's what makes debate a unique site, a unique space. Anyways, the first they say that they are not literally bulk collection data. This one definitely means they are not the resolution, because that plank of the resolution is not writ large any surveillance app that you can come up with. It is specific to section 702. And they also said that we have to defend 702 education is good. I will get to that in a minute, and I'll explain my answers from 2NC Cross. But if that's true, then they also have to defend why education on these varieties of Deleuzian thought and this counter mapping and this counter surveillance, they have to defend why that education is good. Is you're going to force me to sit here and defend why 702 education is good. I'm going to say it's good because, one, we learn about the different kinds of surveillance that are going on on society and how that affects us. 2, that makes us better able to make stable demands upon the state to get rid of those forms of surveillance. And 3, then we get rid of them and we solve those impacts. So that's one net better. That's a reason why learning about 702 is good, instead of just this generic concept of surveillance that they keep on pushing and saying is topical and is in the direction of the resolution, and when in reality that's not, because that's not what the plank of the resolution says. And they say without a stable interpretation, we can't have a stable debate. I agree, but we do have a stable interpretation, and we do have we've given you several reasons. So let's go back to the ground arguments. First, we only have these super generic Duluth indices and these super generic Marxist or these the super generic Capgate that we can use against. So this means that we don't have real ground. At least if they were running some kind of 702 app, we would get access to all the distance and counterpoints, and we could learn about the different ways of dealing with 702 surveillance, but we don't get that. They just have the super generic concept of surveillance. So yeah. Hang on a second. So once again, you can there's so many different theories and so many different authors who combine those or make distinction between their theories. There's no way we can possibly prepare for all these different interpretations or these different forms of critical theory. I only have a limited time. I'm in 2 philosophy classes right now. I'm reading 20, 30, 50 plus pages of philosophy a week. I'm having to do a lot of history. I'm having to do a lot of English, in addition to trying to have some semblance of a social life, in addition to trying to do my own debate work. I can't just read all of these different theories. So for one, it's strategic capacity building. They lock in their own bias, and we need the role of litigation. You should vote neg on T.
Wait, minute 6 or something?
Minute 3.
Minute 3. Alright. Alright, it's case with an overview, MT. Good. I don't have to reinvent the wheel here. They've dropped our case. Our argument is that subjectivity is mired in data, which takes on a life of its own. That metadata is weaponized in order to deter any and all typical forms of mass surveillance, which is a means in which control maintains itself. The app solves. Algorithmic governance is our first impact. That's the one we'll go for. This is our passwords argument, where any and all action is controlled through threat categorization, wherein resistance is not really preempted, but it's resolved in advance, which makes top-down methods of resistance futile recreations of that same resistance. T. They said they had a violation and then didn't extend it, so vote F on presumption. Also, the judge is an educator, but rules of the ballot don't really matter. If you interrogate the history of surveillance, we've provided way better examples. They didn't provide any examples for how you as a historian should render a negative ballot. There's literally no reason to vote negative if you are a historian. Occupy to rear Tapple, it's all the same argument. Short periods of effective resistance are the only way forward. Everything fails in the end. It's about that constant shifting of resistance. They seem to default to that the ballot should affirm better education. I don't know what it means not to have negation or why those debates are meaningless. This is super war. They don't have a reason why their education is good. good. I'm also perfectly fine reading this app, spreading our revolutionary education and having no contestation. TLIT is bad. Stable demands are bad. If reform like anti-racism has solved, then Condoleezza Rice proves that progress only happens if it can be put to work for state and capital. Their critical theory prep arguments are new and bad, and you shouldn't flow them. Neg prep checks any side bias that our evil high theory causes. The proliferation of this app is solvency. This is an old Michigan KM argument, but it's a pretty good one. The more our app's theory is read, the more it's spreading and solving. They are wrong about Occupy. Surveillance is ubiquitous. You cannot run and hide. You can only create small spaces of effective resistance. The app makes it possible by mapping the way the state plots of resistance, which they have conceded. Think of the Apple fake Facebook locations. It worked for a week, but then prevented hundreds of arrests, giving time for activists to resist. They said singular tactics fail. There's no link. Top of the 2AC said we forward multiplicity of disparate tactics, not our method. Also, the only standard they've given us is that the app needs to be negatable. They have not adequately proven this in their debate. It's impossible to engage or challenge the app. It's a question of education. Their model incentivizes a total collapse of K debate, in which the only space is to bring about these alternative arguments into the forefront. They haven't provided warranted arguments for why that knowledge they gain from reading a terror DA against bulk data collection app is a better form of education. The 2NR doesn't give any defense of the importance of policy debate in one individual round, which means any educational benefit you find to apps, alternative process to problem solving, it's fine, out of time. Unique approaches, different lines of thinking, or reasons to prefer the app. We aren't only negatable, but also in the direction of the topic. We indict close surveillance state apparatuses and give them opportunities to challenge our methodology or defend the state as good. We challenge a government action in which surveillance, which means that we are predictable. Yes, the app is a concrete material move. Concessions in case out of the block are damning, and the 2NR is a reach at best. Countermapping is a methodology that involves people doing things like sending fake meetings to Facebook to confuse the police or using tech. This is a material action that people can engage in when seeking to avoid surveillance actions. The proliferation of the app is something I did that. Also, content over form. They don't have a reason why their education is uniquely key, which means you presume app because our education outweighs their desire for having a form which is more predictable. There's no reason why their engagement is essential to debate. We can literally just impact turn it at this point. They conceded the warrant. The one case argument I think they kind of extend is that Deleuzian thought destroys like lines of flight. They like shadow extended it, I think, but no, we're an analysis of lines of death because we think that lines of flight always get co-opted, which is like a major critique of Deleuzian Guattari's thought. And also, I'll go back to the top, one sec. Yeah, if we want to critique of mass surveillance, then this is 6 minutes of offense against any topical action because they all become rearticulations of power via control that we're winning impact turns to. The transparency disad when completely conceded. The logic of predictability presupposes adherence to norms that replicate the surveillance industrial complex wherein compliance is forced and deviations that are deterred and violently eliminated, and that limits place an arbitrary boundary on what is and is not sufficiently within the scope of the resolution, which links to the impact scenario explained in the overview. Oh, also they didn't really extend any impact of any kind coming out of the 2NR, which means that any residual impact is solved by the app's education. Other rounds can check. Yeah, that's kind of a new argument, but it doesn't really matter at this point because the transparency disad means any predictable resistance, like the app means without the app coming first. Any predictable form of resistance is always going to be co-opted, which means any topical education is never actually going to resolve they haven't made any fiat arguments, so don't give them any. Oh, and also the 3 new links in the 1AR disproves any fairness argument they might go for because it's abusive. The impact turn to confirmation bias, they've completely conceded. We said that's the Oliver card. They need to win a bias. They need to win a response to the bias towards our method, not towards our method, not towards activists implementing the app's method to have any offense. I guess I'll just explain the app's method. We forward critical cartography because the state is engaging in a practice of cartography, mapping out resistance. The activists are already, everyone engaging in any sort of resistance to the state's actions or the state's will is going to be co-opted because the state is mapping out how that resistance operates. You can see this through like the police creating a community threat checklist for largely poor Black and Hispanic communities, where you see cop watches, or excuse me, not cop watches, community watches, where certain neighborhoods, the police come in and ask people to surveil their neighbors because they're especially dangerous people. This sort of thing is the state producing a collective mapping of the way resistance and operates to them, and therefore trying to put forth individuals' resistance to try to manipulate that so that other people engage in productive methods of resistance for the state. We would say that any indication they have put forth is that, and the AF resolves better.
it might be
It's
sick,
okay.
so I probably don't wanna.
Good debate. No worries.
You Nick?
I'm sorry.
You Nick?
Yes.
Okay. And then, was Gabriel the 2?
Yes.
Alright. I end up voting affirmative in this debate. I think that, I think they do have an interpretation, and it's that you need to have concrete action that affirms the resolution. I think that the affirmative is right, that what that means, you know, sort of changes throughout the debate in terms of what exactly it is. And so it's like, when you say you have a minimalist interpretation, you can do whatever you want as long as you sort of have a concrete action that's, you know, topical. That's not really true, because you can't, like, your Erickson card in fact says that you need to be able to use the United States federal government, so you can't just be an activist acting against the federal government. And then you're like, and it's not just like you have to use the government in the area of, you have to do a specific 702 restriction, and like, well, I guess statutory or judicial. And it's like, but like, I don't know what those terms mean until you actually get into what these 702 restrictions are, and then, and all those sort of things. So I think that the what it counts as is shifty. What I would have liked to see from this framework would be like, literally they need to give us an advocacy text. And at some points you're like, our call for a concrete action is just give us an advocacy text, because we want to be able to debate something stable, because look how they shift. They said occupy, and then they say not occupy. They actually say occupy is an example of a movement that was working and then failed, and then we had to move to another movement, because every movement will eventually fail. We have to move on. So I don't think it's a shift, but I see how you could see it as a shift. And if they had a stable advocacy text, then you would have something to attack. But the interpretation you have is not just they need to have a stable advocacy text, but it has to be resolutionally tied, which is then, you know, more, you know, I'm not sure what that is, and then some of your, well, you can't debate at all, is contingent upon like the lack of advocacy text versus like the resolution of that. Like, because I think there are ways that you can debate this. It's not like you lose every element of debate whatsoever. And I think that they do say why debating about 702 is important, is because then we could learn about 702, and then if we could learn, we could make a demand about the government, and then we could change that, right? And so those might not be, in your mind, warranted out really well, but instead of being like, they never give a reason, which, you know, just be like, their only reason is so we can challenge 702, our affirmative says these reforms and these direct actions are always going to fail, which is a bad form of education. Our method of education is better, and that comes across, you know, more honest to what actually takes place in the debate, but then also makes you weigh it against what they're actually saying is beneficial, opposed to just being like weighing it against the assumption of nothing. At the same time, I think that you need to explain, why should I care about 702? How insidious is it really? Like, I don't know, unless I insert all of my knowledge for why this bulk incidental collection, you know, matters. and I'm not going to be able to do that for you. So you want to explain to me why we should get the education to challenge that initiative, or why should we get the education to challenge first use policy? Why those are key elements of education? Because the affirmative is telling me why learning to be able to use the tools against itself are ways that we can be able to continuously fight back against the way that surveillance tools are used. Now, something that I think that you could have done with this framework is that they, to a certain extent, make the resolution bidirectional, because they say we should use the tools of surveillance against the state itself, which means that you couldn't run an argument that's just like surveillance good, right? Because Cop Watch and those sort of things that they give as potential examples use surveillance. So like your core impact turn to this area of the resolution, they're supposed to say surveillance bad, you get to say surveillance good if you want, necessary for security, etc. They could say, well, no, because we use surveillance against those big threats as well, which is, a way where you could be like, look, there is not a negative to this because they can take on both sides of these debates. And earlier on, I was thinking, why don't you just tell them they could say surveillance good, that gives them their core ground, but then later on it's like, oh, well, you don't necessarily give them that ground per se. I mean, you sort of do because you say you unravel the way that surveillance operates, so if they can win that like state surveillance of populations is necessary to stop terrorists, that would be an impact turn that they could use, and that's an impact turn someone could use against a policy surveillance app. So they do get some of those core ground arguments, I think. So that's how I end up evaluating some like the framework reasons. Is just like with a sort of a shifty interpretation and me not believing that you could eliminate all elements that you had no possibility to negate. It makes it easier for me to believe that the type of education the affirmative promote would be desirable. I think that instances of abuse in the shift that you point out, it's like you read indicts against their author and they're like, well, they're not our author. We don't use this portion of it, right? That would have been a great place to highlight because they like to say throughout the debate, we gave you ground because you got your cap links and you got your indite links. But then they say no link on cap and then they say no link on your author indite. So you don't get those, right? You made it on a separate and they said, no, that's not good enough. And they make an argument how bad argumentation doesn't justify this, but it's like, listen, this is all throughout your cards and then you're like, this indite doesn't apply. Right, we gave an honest effort, and you're still not giving us the ability to debate, and so like those become instances, and that would work really good with a interpretation that's just like you need an advocacy text, because then we could debate lines of flight, or we could debate something else, because then we know where you're coming from, and then you could say, well, lines of flight rely on the metaphor of flying, which then Duluth could get from bird analogies or wherever your card's going to come to, right? I'm just guessing at where it might where you can connect it, but then you're like, now we have this stable point, opposed to just being like, well, we're not that part of Duluth because that's not the part of our underlying text and stuff like that, right? So then I think it's easier to win that versus forcing yourself to defend a restricted version of like government restriction of 702 violations to defend only that type of education when most of your impacts for framework are more general to being like we just need the ability to negate, not necessarily we need like this specific policy making education. So I think that different interpretation would be better in this individual round. And yeah, I would for the neg side what I just told the F side what I just told the neg is just don't be like you have all this great ground and then no link all of that ground at the same time, or just give up other examples of ground that they have opposed to pointing to that sort of stuff. I do think that the role of the ballot coming out in the 1AR is probably a little late in the debate. I mean, they don't bring theirs out explicitly until the block, so it's like I could maybe justify it, but I think you should maybe move that to how you want me to orient the debate into 2AC, and I think it'll also make it clearer. It's like, if there's a framework debate, I think that's a good place to put. It's like, how do you want me to, adjudicate this round versus framework would be a useful spot to get that debate started.
Do you have any other comments for the 1AR beyond that? I feel like framework was a little.
Yeah, I think that, it seemed like they would probably end up going for framework in this debate. I think that a lot of the 1AR was sort of like shotgun, like you just sort of like extended a bunch of different arguments opposed to trying to create a strategy for why I would end up voting for you in that regards. And I think it would be useful to, instead of just like, at the top of the affirmative, just talking about your affirmative, but then using that as a funneling point for the rest of the debate, right? Like your spectral strategies are necessary. This answers both their cap K alternative, which assumes that there's only one way that we can ever approach things, as well as framework that assumes there's only one way that debate can ever be engaged with. This serves as a reason to reject the negative team because it stops us from coming up with new ideas and new possibilities. And so then everything you're saying is contextualized in the for a ballot, and then when you're making the arguments on the line by line, their arguments that I know why I'd be able to vote for you on there, opposed to the way it comes across is a lot of just like answers to their arguments, tit for tatting, opposed to like something larger. I did like, I forget what you labeled it, but whatever was like the predictability just add, you know, in terms of like, you know, being visible to be, you know, so.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Do you think impact turning ground by the end of the debate was okay, or would you prefer we didn't do that? Just be like monologues good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, like, I mean, it's not the most persuasive argument, I think, to just be like, we can do whatever we want as long as it creates forms of resistance, and, like, you know, that's desirable, right? I do want to change the world, but I also, like, you know, have agreed to sort of, like, have a, you know, a debate as well, so it can't just be, like, you know, let's all rally against something. So I think some of the other tools in your arsenal are better, but, I mean, it wasn't an illogical step to take in this individual debate.
Okay.